Torah is just a long string of numbers. Some say that it's a code sent to us from God.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's just kid stuff. Check this out, okay? The word for the Garden of Eden, Kedem. Numerical translation, 144. Now the value of tree of knowledge, all right, in the garden, right? Eitz HaChaim, 233. 144, 233. And you can
Those
take
are
those
Fibonacci
numbers. So the
You know, like the Fibonacci sequence.
Fibonacci.
Fibonacci is an Italian mathematician in the 13th century. If you divide 144 into 233, the result approaches theta.
Theta?
Theta. The Greek symbol for golden ratio, golden spiral.
Wow. I never saw that before. That's like that series you find in nature? Like the face of a sunflower?
Wherever the spirals.
You see this math everywhere.
And welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And this is just going to be a live react video to Wes Huff's rising star. You know, let's give him credit. Let's give this guy credit. He's a rising star. He's an up and coming. He just landed some. He's successful. He's. You can't hate that, right?
I mean, look, he's an expert at Bushido. And you ever seen those martial artists that when you come in, they're like, they don't even touch them. They just move their arms. And the person's like, ah.
Yeah.
That's what
like,
I feel his words are doing. Okay.
Right.
And the audience members just, oh, did you see that invisible uppercut that Wes just did? And you're like,
it's like WWE wrestling. Like, did you see what he did? I can't believe it.
Look, they are so, I love the reverse psychology that is being pulled. You guys are obsessed with Wes and you just want to ride Wes's wave. That's how you know someone's literally got this cult messiah.
That would be valid. It'd be valid if Wes didn't already try to ride one of my videos before this even all happened. So he lost that. He lost that right when he did that.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, facts don't matter, bro. I'm hoping we bring some facts today, but facts don't matter. If they knew that their broski Wes did a hit piece on you, totally misinformed, had all his facts messed up as far as critiquing you, but if he would have come prepared, you know, this would have been a different kind of thing. But
Yeah.
he hit you because you were on Danny Jones, which has
Right.
1 million subscribers. He wanted the popularity.
He wanted to jump on the
Finally got
wave,
him
and he
through.
did it. So now I'm doing it back. So now he's having a now he's on a podcast. I'm going to respond. I just have a lot more to respond to. That's the difference. He didn't have much to go off, and in fact, the little that he went off is already taken down. So
Yeah.
if I say something right there. But all right, so I skipped ahead 5 minutes because the first 5 minutes is all just, hey, how you doing? And I'm just jumping ahead after the ad that he had rolled. And the reason why I'm doing that is because he is talking about Billy Carson here. And I do want to talk about this a little bit. So I do think it's worth, I don't know what I'm doing here. There we go.
You'll figure it out.
I do want to discuss because, I mean, that's what I was trying to do, the one where it's a full screen, but we're still there. There we go. That's the one I want. Okay. And then we can move these around, right? Maybe not. Okay. So I'm going to play it from right here, and we're just going to, you and I are just going to go, we're just raw dogging it, basically. Yeah. Nothing's planned. Raw dogging it. I'm going to put it on 1.5 speed so we can get through it quicker, but I want us to pause at any time that we want to respond to anything, and I will do the same for myself. Cool. So enough said.
Yeah, the cease and desist letter said, I don't want you to use my name or my face in anything going forward, and anything you've used up until this point, you need to remove. And I was given 24 hours notice to do this.
But if you're a public figure, he's clearly a public figure. Is that even, can you actually say? No,
you can't do it.
So what was does he have a lawyer that wrote this cease and desist? Is he a lawyer?
No. So he actually, it's interesting because Mark Menard, who was the guy who hosted this interaction, he sent Mark a handwritten one. And then he eventually gave Mark an official one from his lawyer. So,
all right, I just want to stop just to let people know what's going on here. So Wes Huff, this is how he got catapulted into the spotlight, basically. He had that debate with Billy Carson. Billy Carson wanted to sue him, and he's talking about the suing thing. Did you want to say something?
Yeah. There are people I've known who've asked me to remove content that they didn't want out there. Not going to name names, but for job reasons, for other reasons, they've asked me certain videos that they thought were not going to make them look good. And because I'm a decent human being and I respect not trying to destroy someone, because my point is to try and, make mutual friendships, I've removed those videos. And yes, there are legal ways that you can pull videos down or have lawyers try to do that. It's not easy, but it can be done. At the end of the day, it's just ironic that the supposed Christ-like followers are pushing through.
They are like they are like sharks smell blood and water, basically. They want that. They want that feast. I couldn't find the clip because you and I both know about it. I think he took it down. But one of Wes's friends, the one that hooked up the debate, I don't even know his name. I have no idea what his name is.
He just said Mark, I think, or something.
It's Mark?
I think.
I wonder if anyone can find his channel in the description or somewhere. Because on his channel, I can't find it anymore. I don't know what happened to it. I tried to search for this. You were there. We couldn't find it. Where Wes and this guy did a debate reaction. And the reason, the fact that it's down now is very sketchy to me. Because these guys were so giddy over what happened. It was like a setup. He was like, we're going to set this up. He's not going to know. I'm going to have Wes come in here, and he's going to get totally blown out of the water and not even understand what happened. Because Wes is an expert and he's not. And I'm thinking to myself, this is supposed to be Billy's friend and he's going to explain it in this clip. It's supposed to be his friend doing this to you did this to your friend. That's kind of messed up. And then they start praying about it. He goes, "Dear Lord, I'm so glad you're using us as instruments in your work." And I'm just thinking, that's what God wants you to do. He wants you to set people up and embarrass them so that he can get his word across instead of like showing miracles in front of everybody like he used to do. He needs some pseudo scholar to come and embarrass people online. That's his message. Like, come on, dude. I don't know. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
So I actually was sent one by his lawyer, which I, screenshotted, posted publicly online and said, I'm going to ignore this. And then, but he sent Mark, who was the podcast host, as far as I'm aware, numerous cease and desists, and Anton, who was the media manager. He sent a number of cease and desists.
It's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate.
When you get caught with your pants down, you're supposed to say, "I got caught with my pants down."
Yeah,
that's what you're supposed to do. Like, it's the only, especially if you're public. Like, it's very clear that you're incorrect.
I do agree.
The irony of the situation is, if he just kind of left it,
I do too.
Probably wouldn't have made anywhere close to the splash.
No,
that it's made. And we told him that.
I agree with that too.
Barbra Streisand effect is going to happen.
Yeah,
like, you're a big enough personality that if I make a video and say like, "Hey, I had this conversation, didn't go well for Billy, and Billy doesn't want it released, that's going to start to gain traction sooner or later.
Yeah. It's
Well, he
you know,
made it make
the prob-
traction.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. If he would just kind of let it go, it would have looked like it was an off moment for him. He didn't have his A game. And you and I both know that there was parts in that debate where Billy Carson wasn't wrong, and he just kind of Billy. You could tell Billy was not into it. He kind of had his head down and was like, "If you say it was a forgery, it's a forgery. I don't really care." And like that part right there, he was talking about the Gospel of Philip, which is not a forgery, unless if you're gonna use the criteria to call Philip a forgery, then the Gospel of Mark or the Gospel of John is probably a forgery too.
Right.
Or all the Gospels might even be forgeries. We don't know if they really were written by those people. So Philip's the same as any other gospel in that regard. Yeah, calling it a forgery makes no sense.
He starts with this standard. Yeah, your point is a really good one. Like, look at all the forged letters of Paul or the forged Peter, James.
That they all consider canon to them, scripture to them.
They're not forged.
Scholars call that forgery. Like, to me, Philip is no different. Philip is a Christian text that were written by Christians that meant something to Christians. You can't just take that and say, oh, it's a forgery, put it aside. Billy has every right to bring up what's in Philip and apply that to early Christianity. There's nothing wrong with that.
I think people might go, why do we get our hands dirty in this? And there's trolls that are going to come and they're going to go, because you're being paid by Billy. Dude, no. I just want the truth.
I don't care. If Billy's wrong, I'm going to say Billy's wrong. You'll hear me say it throughout the video.
Well, Billy's wording. I spoke to Billy about this. I've actually communicated with Billy on the phone since this to get his side. Look, when this all went down, I reached out to Wes to try and get a hold of him, sent him friend request, no response, private message through Kip, because Kip's in communication with him. He told me he wouldn't have time till 2026 to have a conversation. And I'm like, interesting. Well, I'm not going to just pick one side and not talk to the other. I reached out to Billy. I'd like to get you and me, Neil, to have a discussion with Billy about this.
Yeah, I think so. I'll do it.
To recap where we think he could have done better, his wording, he could have said things differently because getting very technical. But even in this stream, we've already seen hit pieces by people showing by Wes's own literal word for word stuff, he's wrong, right? So we'll get there. But
yeah,
I just figure I'd say, like, the point you're bringing up is a valid point, and I feel like the reason you and me are getting our hands dirty is because there are things Billy was saying that aren't completely.
Yeah, I'm not going to let Wes get away with just a complete slaughter on this. This happened to me with Amon and Dan McClellan when I responded to Dan McClellan's podcast with Danny Jones, and everyone's like, "So what? You agree with Amon and everything?" And I'm like, yeah, no, I just saw somebody overcompensate for how confident they were that Amon was wrong when there were points that Amon was actually correct about. And I wanted people to know those nuances. That was the whole point of that video. So I'm doing the same thing here. And that, I think everyone should be like that. I think that's how everybody should be towards everything, towards every discussion. You shouldn't just side with the guys you like all the time. You should side with whoever is being not even if you agree with them, as long as
you should be allowed to disagree with them, Neil.
If what they're saying is plausible, just admit it.
Yeah, but if you can't disagree with them, if you can't disagree, I disagreed with Billy and we talked over the phone, and Billy's like, that's fine. Like, he didn't get all up and hurt. With Amon, he gets upset, or certain types of personalities, they don't like that you disagree with them. Screw that. I'm not following your cult. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to think my own way.
Right.
The problem is to really delve into these subjects. It takes a tremendous amount of research, years and years and years of research. You really have to know what you're talking about. Most of us don't.
Well, especially with languages.
Yes.
Like, we didn't get into it. I hoped to have, in our initial conversation, kind of press him a little bit more on the more overt things he'd said about, like, Greek and Hebrew and Sumerian, because I've studied a number of ancient languages. And when you study the languages, you realize the complexities of these things. And so when someone hasn't and they're making statements, they're obviously indicative of someone who hasn't studied them. It's super apparent.
Right.
That is an ironic statement for Wes Huff to make, as you're going to see very, very, very soon here. Someone who studied this stuff and makes statements that are obviously false, and it's very obvious. Oh man, it's ironic to come from his mouth. That's all I got to say for so far.
Yeah.
We'll put our money where our mouth is. We'll just go.
Right. And so I think it's one thing to be making claims about, say, like Christian history or the Bible. But when you start to get into like linguistics and philology, it gets messy. And if you don't know what you're talking about, it gets really apparent really fast.
And I agree, it does get messy. It does get apparent very fast, as you present to us Like you say things like Derek. We did the response when he's talking about Saturnalia sources being, they're just late. Like, and having that, like, the look on your face, like, so confident. And the problem with Saturnalia is our sources are just too late. 4th century BC sources are late. Sources that predate Christianity itself are late. What are you talking about? So this is the type of thing that I'm talking about. But I don't want to repeat from the other video.
I think dude. Do you think he's pulling talking sources from just other people and not actually searching this stuff himself?
I wondered this myself. So sometimes it sounds like he's talking out of his ass. There are other times where it sounds like he heard something from a scholar somewhere, and then he sort of stays within the bounds of what's being said by the scholar, and then he takes it and runs with it to another direction. So what was the one example that I heard recently that was, like scholars that are like, we found this manuscript P52. It's going to be in this video, but I'll give you a little precursor for it. P52 John's Gospel manuscript fragment. They date it. Most scholars date it to the second half of the 2nd century. I've seen some say 175. I've seen some say 150 or whatever. And there's a few that go to 125. Those people get called out a lot. I've seen those articles written where they're like, the 125 people are out of their minds. They're just trying to push it back as early as possible. Anyways, I don't want to get too much into that, but the thing is, the way Billy Carson presented it to Joe, as we're going to find out later on in this video.
Mean Wes.
The way Wes presented it to Joe, I'm sorry, was
You're
that
good?
as if all scholars, he says this too, they're all dating this to the beginning of the 2nd century. All of them are. And like, what it tells me that he heard from a scholar that this is probably early 2nd century, and then he just ran with it as if this is a fact. And it's far from being a fact.
Right.
So we'll get into that though.
So the gentleman who brought the two of you together, what was his goal? Like, what was he trying to do, and how did he approach you?
Yeah, so he's friends, or I should say was friends. He was friends with Billy. They live in the same neighborhood.
Oh boy.
So it's actually become really, it's become pretty rough for him. So he released a video yesterday, which I think people should go and check out, where he kind of gives his perspective. He's been friends with Billy for years. He was at Billy's wedding.
Oof.
Billy had 15 people at his wedding.
Oof.
Mark was one of them. And
that is not cool. No offense. Look, I'm not saying that like the whole thing should have got taken down, or that like Billy's should like get. I'm not like defending what happened or anything, but that is very strange to me. That you're like very close to this person family wise, going to their weddings, your children play together, and you're gonna set them up to get murdered on in front of millions of people. That is very strange behavior for somebody who's pretending to be a Christian. Yeah, look, I'm just saying, like,
there's no hidden notion that you're my friend. Okay, I've had many people try to make you not my friend. A lot of people have tried to get between you and me, and there will be many people who attempt to do so. Futile attempt, but they will do their damnedest to try and separate you and me. I would never screw you over like this, dude.
I couldn't think of doing that to anybody, even my lower tier friends.
Yes, I'm just saying, like,
that's crazy to do somebody. I'm gonna set him up to kill him. That's crazy. Anyways, you get what I'm saying.
They live in this community in Florida. Their sons are friends. Their wives would hang out. Oof. And
here, Joe.
Mark told me, he's like, I've been hearing Billy say, he wants to debate. Nobody will debate him for years. And so, as far as I think Mark was concerned, he was giving Billy the opportunity that Billy had told a lot of people he wanted.
Right.
And so he, this was set up in that Mark and Billy have been talking. They've been on each other's podcasts in the past, and they've been friends, but more like business colleagues. Like Mark has come out and said, I hadn't really gone into the stuff he'd said about Christianity or ancient religions or whatever that much. Mark is he's a Christian. He has like a public profession of faith, and him and Billy had talked about the fact that they wanted to talk about like faith stuff and some of their differences, and that that Mark was kind of prepping for this, and his media manager Anton had sent him some of my stuff and said, like, Wes has done some stuff on some things that Billy has talked about, and
Anton,
maybe you should look up
guy, I thought,
some of the stuff, read into it. And Mark, very last minute, was like, well, I feel inadequate. Do you think I could just ask Wes? And so he DM'd me on Instagram and just kind of laid this out, like, hey, I'm gonna have Billy in my studio in 24 hours. I can tell him you're coming, I can tell him who you are, I can like give him your background, but would you be willing to come? And so that's what I did. And so that's how it got set up.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but was Billy aware that this was going to be a debate, or did he think it was going to be just a discussion? Like, what did he think it was going to be?
No, he'd been given all of the prerequisites. Like, he knew we're going to go over some of his stuff that he said about Christianity. that I was going to come in, who I was, what my name was, some of my background, and that part of the conversation was going to be me kind of asking.
I just realized something, dude. I just realized something. I was wrong about the video that I was talking about. I got to retract something now. Anton is not the guy who was friends with. All right, so maybe I'm wrong here. Wes.
Mark,
So I found the channel. It's Anton Wabitsky, and he wrecks. So I want to play this clip real quick, and then I'll explain what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna go back. We're gonna go back to this, but this is what I meant earlier when I couldn't find a video. I actually found it now. So let me share my screen, and
we're going to talk about and react to.
Is this the guy?
This is Anton.
Debate.
Okay.
With Billy.
So these guys give off all the weird vibes to me, by the way, that they're just not really.
Oh, you want to see weird vibes? This is why I brought this video in. Ready for this?
You found it. Okay.
Is this the one? Oh, so this is him by himself. I'm sorry. I got to go back to his channel. I got to find the one where he's with Wes.
Huh. Hell Zeus Yeshua. Oh,
yeah, that's the one. He's Wes, Huff, and Anton break down Billy's attempt to debunk us. Is it this one?
Do you want to get this started?
Yeah, this is it. Okay, this is what. No, you ready? You ready to see cringe, dude? You ready to see weird?
Yeah.
Ready to see weird behavior? Watch this.
We good to go?
Yeah, let's go.
Recording. I don't know if Wesley, do you want to pray for us?
Yeah, let's do that. That's a great idea. Lord God in heaven, we just thank you for the ways that you're clearly working in our lives, and the way that you're revealing truth and bringing to light so many things. We thank you for using us as tools in your plan for the glory of your kingdom. And Lord, we just pray that you would guide us in wisdom by your Spirit to just clarify some issues. And that this video, like the previous ones that
God needs to care about this
eye-opening to people and to help people truly see the way, the truth, and the light. So, Lord, would your word be our rule?
How selfish, self-centered do you got to be to think that God, the all-knowing one God, the only one God that exists, is going to worry about this video getting out to people? That is Billy's attempt to debunk us video. And
Dude,
this
why
is
didn't
God.
you pray before you hit record?
Tools. These are God's tools in his.
Why didn't you pray
work.
before you hit record? Why do you want everyone to see this?
Maybe that would have worked. Maybe I would have got more views that way.
Why do what Jesus said? Don't be like the Pharisees. Like, you're literally praying so they can all.
I know
you
got millions of people who are watching. That's another thing I was thinking about. You just want this. It's so performative. It's so performative right off the bat. Oh, should we pray? Why? Yeah, exactly. Why not just do it right before you started?
That would have been better.
Oh, everyone needs to see this. Look, we are the tools of God's word that are bringing people. We're debunking people online. Yeah, that's what God cares about. That's what he wants. Debunk people online. It's so silly. And so they talk about how basically this guy talks about how he set up Wes Huff. Now, I think I have to retract my statement from earlier. This isn't the guy that Wes was good friends with. I don't think. I think he's just one of the producers or something. But in this video, he talks about how he basically set up Wes. Like, yeah, we had this set up
here to Billy, and he was revealing.
But anyways, that's a whole another thing. I want to get back to the Joe Rogan thing.
Yeah.
But that video was very strange to me. The behavior, the like sort of like giddy laughter over the whole thing, and then acting like this is like God's divine mission. It was for me to do this. So weird. All right, you get the point.
I do.
He said. So you didn't watch the 3-hour live stream that they did you?
I watched chunks of it.
Okay.
I watched a little bit. I'm like, oof, I'm going to shut it off. Then I watched a little bit more. Oof.
Yeah. So unfortunately, Billy there says he had no idea going in. And I mean, as Mark said in his video that he released yesterday, I mean, that's patently false. He knew what it was going to be, who was going to be involved, and even some of the things that we would be talking about.
Okay. And he also was claiming that it wasn't a debate, that he had been involved in debates before, and that he would prepare.
Now, I do want to say this.
Something he didn't prepare. But again, it's like, if you ask me about things.
We could jump ahead now, because the Billy Carson thing, I think we're done with this, right?
Wherever you want to go with it.
They talk about this for a few more minutes, and I think we pretty much said what we have to say about it. Like I think we've said what we have to say about it. You know what I mean?
Look, I will say one more thing because I've
Yeah,
actually spoken to Billy. Haven't had the opportunity to speak to Wes because he won't talk. Billy's. You can say this is an excuse. I'm just saying what he told me. So whether you fall on taking his word for it or not, this is what he told me. He's like, straight up, I was sick. I did not feel good. I was not at my best. This was not an organized, formal debate. If you see the setting, we're hanging out, we're just having a conversation, but things start to tense up. And you can tell if you watch back, and I kind of agree with this. I mean, I don't know. I can't read his brain. But the way that Wes starts to... Can you break down the Enuma Elish? Tell me the story of the Enuma Elish. Like he's looking for...
It was... what is your methodology? He asked them, what is your methodology? Right. That's a very strange question to ask somebody because it's about my methodology for what? For what specific claim that I made that you want to know my methodology for? Right. You don't just ask somebody what their methodology is as if that's some like broad stroke question for all things. That's a very strange question to ask somebody. It was a gotcha question because he knew that Billy wouldn't know. It's a very, for a scholar to pull that on somebody. It was a trick move basically.
He was looking for Billy to make a mistake and then would pounce on it.
He was hitting him with questions that were so loaded that no matter what Billy said, it would have looked dumb. That's those type of questions you get from sophistry, basically. It's basically sophistry. There was a lot of sophistry going on.
Right.
So, and like I said, even the parts where he's talking about the Enuma Elish, where Billy rightly said, "Oh, well, there's parts there it looks like Genesis is depended on," and Billy quoted, I think he said, "In the beginning, God created the heavens," so something like that, something along, I don't know, I'm making this up, which is true. Like Enuma Elish and Genesis have a lot of that in common. It's also true that other creation epics have that language too. But but scholars are saying that what Billy said. That's not a crazy thing to say. And Wes Huff played it off as if this is some crazy conspiracy theory. Wes was actually in the wrong in that point.
It's so interesting to hear how Wes tried to make that a win for himself.
It wasn't.
And he then admitted it's an apologetic. Genesis 1 through 11 is an apologetic, which against the earlier Babylonian or Mesopotamian stuff, which would then mean it needed to know that material in order to engage it. So it's got to be somehow reacting and dependent in that sense to the earlier mythology. But if you were to ask Wes, is Genesis 1 through 11 mythology, meaning it's not history, this isn't what happened in actual history, we're dealing with mythological work and whatnot, unlikely he would give you a straight answer. I'm not sure he would just be like, yes, this is mythology. And he might have, I'll say it's the true myth, like C.S. Lewis or something.
Right. Exactly. Good point.
And your convictions, you can persuade a lot of people.
Yeah, competence is not competency.
Yes,
and unfortunately, those things get confused a lot.
Like it covers up for competency sometimes.
Yeah. In religion and politics, and like all sorts of things, right?
In everything. Yeah, in everything.
I mean, another ironic statement by Wes that he kind of does himself.
I think because people want to, it's very difficult to be an expert in a subject, and I think people want to believe that they are, and they don't want to do the work.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's why. Experts themselves feel a lot of inadequacy is because they study a subject and realize I'm never going to get to the bottom of this hole.
Right.
So
unfortunately, most subjects are very, very nuanced and very deep.
Yeah.
Especially
Derek, even though you and I haven't gone the academic route in our sort of last 5 years of our education in these subjects from talking to so many scholars, you and I have really got a taste of how deep these subjects are. Every facet of the humanities is so deep. There's it's like galaxies upon galaxies upon black holes of knowledge. Like there's no way. And when you meet these know-it-all people, Wes is one of these people. This is ironic that he's saying this. Another one is that Red Pen Logic guy. They act like they're experts in all these fields that take dozens of years to study, and they just know it all in their YouTube channels. And just it's like you find these people. It's mostly on the internet. There's these know-it-alls in everything. They just have that. They just know everything about science and math and archaeology. They know about physics. They know about quantum theory. They know about all this stuff. And it's like, bro, I'm sorry, nobody knows all those subjects like you're pretending you do.
Right.
So
Yeah,
he makes a valid point, but it's just funny how he's one of these people that are like this.
Yeah, there's two problems you and I see usually with apologetics is this confidence in a conclusion and working overtime to make the evidence match that, or finding something that somehow fits what you're hoping will match your conclusion. And then the other part is, in the vein of what you were just describing with Wes, he goes outside of his field a lot and makes these kind of bold claims, or will like name drop. I have a friend who knows Sumerian, and it's like, who's your friend? Because you're like,
I can't stand that too. That's another sneaky move people do.
You're trying to destroy this guy.
Yeah.
And then you do these like little like name drop people that I know who help validate what I hope to be true about what I already think here. It's kind of odd to me. I don't know.
It is.
Like, we'll name drop scholars. You and me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna cite who I'm talking about, what book they wrote, or if it's not a scholar, I'm going to the primary sources.
Exactly.
In fact, I mostly go to the primary sources first.
That's what you do mostly. Yeah.
And then when I'm making wild claims, I make sure that I'm not the only one saying it. I make sure, look, this other expert says it too. You know what I mean? That's how I kind of do it. Anyways.
I mean, you're talking about things that were a oral tradition for a long time before they were even written down. So it's a long trudge to get to the bottom of things.
Yeah. And part of the whole, like, what I was trying to get Billy in that conversation that I had with him to get to the bottom of, partly was a question of methodology. Like, I think he got frustrated at me at one point because I kept asking, what are the criteria that you're using when you're looking at one source versus another source and coming up with a conclusion?
That's not how he asked the question, though. He just kind of broadly asked him what his methodology was, basically on everything. Like, it was like it was a weird way to ask that question. He wasn't being specific on what exactly. You could tell Billy was kind of confused by it, which I don't know. Maybe he should have, in hindsight, he should have said on what particular claim do you want my methodology for, and then they could have like hashed it out. So whatever. I just thought it was weird. But anyways,
if let's just say Wes asked you or I, we would probably go, okay, we think that geographically there's proximity for this myth. There's a likely linguistic connection to earlier Mesopotamian with Semitic languages, but we wouldn't even limit it to that because we're more nuanced. There is narrative thematic structural similarities. You could even argue cognates. I mean, like, we could get into these details.
Well, yeah, I would appeal to other scholars like out in the field who like Dennis McDonald in Mimesis, in his Mimesis criteria. It depends on what we're talking about, though. Like, if we're talking about parallels, that's first where I would go to Dennis. I would go to Bruce Loudon. I would go to Thomas L. Thompson and Peter Lemke. And I would go through and I would say, yeah, these guys paved the road for me. I wouldn't say that this is some sort of, like, I didn't get trained in this methodology with a PhD, but I know that I'm standing on firm ground because there's other people who have, and I appeal to them. I admit that. So, I mean, it was just funny because I think he thought that Billy Carson, I think if he kept it broad as possible, it would confuse Billy Carson. He wouldn't have an answer. So that's what I thought was going on there.
Because in historiography, it's the inference to the best explanation. And so there are different ways that you go about that, different methodologies. And historians very rarely disagree on the data and evidence. It's the conclusions that you draw from that. Right. But then there are some things that are just out and out false. And I don't think Billy totally knew what I was talking about, but it's those criteria that we look at when we look at something that does come from like an oral tradition and eventually gets written down and becomes a literary text. And then you analyze that on the basis of it being a literary text.
This is sort of the problem between with being self-taught rather than conventionally academically trained.
Definitely.
Where you're trained in very specific disciplines and you're taught to understand the foundation before you understand like how to put a window in.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that you have to know from the base, from the beginning.
All of this is good stuff, I think.
Do you have power? Like, there's a lot of stuff.
I don't agree with anything that was said there at all.
But the only problem, like earlier when Wes was talking about, usually scholars don't disagree over the evidence. They disagree with the interpretation of the evidence. If I'm getting pedantic here, I would just argue like even his conclusions about how he dates this evidence, how he interprets the evidence itself and what it says or means, that's disputed. And you're going to find much more conservative Christian type scholars and people like him who are looking to push this stuff as early as humanly possible. And then some are like,
that was another issue I have with Wes in this video is he's only appealing to There's certain scholars that agree with him, it seems like. And like I remember I went out of my way when I was on Danny Jones to, if I made a claim in some sort of field, if I was talking about Addis or something, or the Nassenes or something, I made sure. I'll give you a prime example. I won't even just make up some random vague thing. When I brought up Epiphanius' sources about the Christians that were having all these crazy rituals with eating babies and stuff, I said a lot of scholars think this is nonsense, that Epiphanius is making this up. I didn't just go with because there are scholars that don't think that. There are scholars that think Epiphanius is legit and is actually talking about a group of Christians that actually existed. I could have just been like Wes Huff and said, yes, their scholars think that this is a real text, and Epiphanius is talking about real Christians who actually ate babies. Now imagine imagine how dishonest that would be if I didn't actually bring up. By the way, though, a lot of scholars do think this is bullshit. And I remember specifically saying that to Danny Jones. That's the type of, when you go down these podcasts and you start arguing for things, you gotta be nuanced.
That's the problem with what you and I saw with IP's presentation at that conference. He brings in, it's agenda driven. It's not actually presenting a much more nuanced perspective. No. And it was supposedly only going at the zeitgeist. Turns out 80% of it applied to any historical critical method of anyone who's actually looking into this material. This is why guys go, why are you responding? He's talking to mythicists because he said the word mythicist at the very beginning of the video. Did you watch the video? Do you understand what he's saying?
That's what they do. You're right. Good point.
Exactly.
There's a lot of things going on when you're trying to construct an expertise in something, especially something that is so complicated. And one of the things that I've gotten out of, I've probably watched 20 hours of your stuff over the last couple of weeks. And you've spent a lot of time on this. This is not a casual cursory examination of these texts and of religion. This is a long journey. And that's what's particularly exceptional and really interesting to me, because I'm always fascinated by people that have really gone down the road, like really gone down the road, because you don't meet a whole lot of them. You know, I know a lot of Christians that can quote you some versions of the New Testament, some Psalms, but the go all the way to the back, way. And that's what you've done. That's very interesting. So this is like, how old are you?
I'm 33,
which is very young for someone who has the depth of knowledge that you have. So you've been doing this essentially from that miraculous moment. That ignited this spark, even though you came from a missionary background, and then from then on. So for the past 11 years. 12 years or 20 years, 30 years. Like, it's your whole life, essentially. It's all been this.
Yeah, to a certain degree. I mean, I went to university with full intention of going into the police force. I did my undergraduate studies, and I kind of mapped out this plan that I was going to become a police detective.
He does.
And that was my goal.
And
I think I realized.
Why not? Because you like getting to the bottom of things?
It could be.
Because you do. Right?
Yeah, well,
if someone spends 21 years like getting to the bottom of a religion,
Joe is like throwing all these compliments on this guy without realizing he's really not that deep that you think. Getting to the bottom of things, you mean trying to find things that validate what he already believes. That's what he should say. I mean, I'm sorry, Joe, but like, that is just, you're not diagnosing this dude correctly at all.
Well, listen, for Joe, I mean, you and I have watched some of these shows, right? And
sometimes he's got people that are just out of their mind.
Well, imagine if he, like, dude, with the kind of platform he has, imagine if he did have you and me. He said, dude, I want these two guys, Gnostic Informant and MythVision, to come on, give me an alternative perspective. Let's see how deep they can go. Dude, imagine what kind of episode we could pull in 3.5 hours where we actually dove into eyewitnesses, manuscript tradition, start talking about the Christianities, plural, Paul, understanding him as a Gnostic, or even alternative perspectives of the New Testament, what's going on with John's gospel, the missing ending of Mark, the contradictions amongst this material, the birth narratives that don't match. We start breaking all of this down. Imagine what Joe would do at the end of that episode going, oh my God, I got full bullshito over here. And I got much more context just now from people who've been listening to hundreds of PhDs and have been looking at the primary sources themselves.
Absolutely.
Eddie. Because they're, I mean, 3,000 years old, but not quite that. They're like 2,000 plus years old.
Animal skins too, right?
Yeah, well, all sorts of things. Animal skins, papyri, and then some of them are actually done on copper. Really? They're like inscribed in copper.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, one of the coolest ones. Actually, this relates because I know you're a Marco Allegro guy. The first time I was introduced to Marco Allegro was not his Sacred Mushroom and the Cross stuff, but he published a book on what's called a copper scroll, because part of the Dead Sea Scroll fragments
is playing Joe right now
on copper, which is an ancient treasure map.
Yeah, he can tell he's trying to reel him in. You like Marco Allegro? Well,
Allegro.
I like Marco Allegro. Yeah, I don't think he likes Marco Allegro. Maybe he does. I don't know. Marco Allegro is not a Christian, though, was he?
No, Mark
Yeah.
Allegro was
'Cause he's
sacred
into that-
mushroom.
he's sacred
Massage.
mushroom,
It was
yeah.
a mushroom experience.
Right, but he was a scholar though. He was a PhD, and so maybe that's where I don't know. Let's see what he says.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Online?
Yeah, Jamie, pull up
Jamie.
the. Hey.
There it is. Wow.
Yeah. So it's in Hebrew, and it is wild. So it has these sites where it says buried treasure is found. And
Whoa.
there have been a number of guys who have tried to like look for it, and so
Does it say what the treasure is?
you know what? Off the top of my head, I don't know. But
Look how crazy that language is.
I know, right?
It's a crazy amount of
and so
a lot of
So,
gold.
but the Dead Sea Scrolls, so it's like stuff like this. It's papyri, it's animal skins, and it's a number of different languages. So the vast majority of it is in Hebrew, but there's also a lot in Aramaic and then Greek and in Nabatean. So it's like an umbrella term to just describe a whole bunch of literature. So a lot of it is biblical because it was written by this group out in the desert called the Essenes who lived at Qumran. So
we don't know that they're Essenes for sure. We don't know for sure. They don't call themselves Essenes in their literature. Now, if you look at Josephus's and Philo's description of the Essenes, they do there are a lot that lines up, but there's also a lot that doesn't line up. So they might be a break-off sect because the Essenes, according to Josephus, they lived in cities. They didn't just live in the desert. That wasn't just an Essene thing. People seem to think that. Josephus says they live in cities with other Sadducees and Pharisees and whatnot. So what I think is going on is I think the Dead Sea Scroll community was sort of a break-off shoot of the Essenes, but that's not necessarily true that they're the Essenes. They don't say that they're the Essenes in their literature. So, by the way, Kip did say that he made a lot of mistakes that I'm probably missing because I don't know the Dead Sea Scrolls. But based on you and I talking, there was blunders after blunder after blunder on all this Dead Sea Scrolls talk. I'm probably gonna miss a lot of it.
Like you said, we're coming in this raw. We're not gonna cover every little thing that Wes says. We're gonna try and catch stuff as we go. There's a lot though that you can pick apart and realize, man. I mean, just get someone else.
Right there. He says they're a group called the Essenes. That's not necessarily true. We don't know that. This is a debated topic. Hotly debated topic in scholarship. Are they the Essenes? Are they not? Nobody really knows for sure. So it's the Qumran community. That's all we really know. They could have been a mixture of a bunch of things. We just don't know.
But then other stuff of it is just, it's just Jewish literature of various stripes that were hidden in caves all around the Dead Sea.
So the scrolls, as it were, aren't all biblical.
But notice he already painted it, Neil.
Counting of the time.
He said that some of it's biblical literature, and I'm getting pedantic here again, but like here he is saying biblical literature, and then all this other Jewish literature. At this time when they're writing this, there is no Bible. So this is so anachronistic to even talk about there's this literature and there's that literature. And there's two different kinds of literature. So when you get to the New Testament, you got canonical literature, and then you have forged or pseudepigrapha or apocrypha. You know what I mean?
You have like parts of the Bible that you have the Torah as the 5 books of Moses. You have the 12, the prophets. You have the writings, the Ketuvim. You have the Mishle. You have the wisdom sources and the Psalms. You have the Bible is sort of. It's looser. It's not like we know today the Bible with the six books, but like there is a Bible somewhat. The Bible's sort of coming together at this point. But you're right though. What does he mean by some of it's biblical, some of it's not? Because all of it's biblical to them, all of it's scripture to them.
Or in some way, in some way the literature is meaningful, but it's not canonical. Like we don't, that doesn't happen yet. That's later.
There's not the canon thing is not really a thing yet. Well, unless it's like talking about the Torah as canonical, that would be canonical, right? I don't know though. You might be right. This is a good question. I don't
think so, because even Enochian literature, it's argued by certain scholars is competing against Torah-ish sects.
Yeah. You would take both of them equally as serious. Is that what you're getting at? Because I 100% agree with you on that.
Yeah.
They're both just as seriously taken at that time period. People in the Scrolls community aren't going, Enoch, that's apocryphal. Oh, give me Genesis. Let's read Genesis. They're not doing that.
The New Testament isn't for sure with its usage of Enoch. So
all that apocryphal, pseudepigraphal stuff, that's all later terminology from the church. So
times.
Yeah. Oh, Jamie, look at that. 65 tons of gold and 26 tons of silver.
65 tons.
That's a lot.
Damn.
That's a lot. How many Cuban links can you make out of that?
You can see why someone would try to track that down.
Boy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you know, when we're talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls, like you have ones like the Great Isaiah Scroll, which is fully complete. Like it's a copy of the book of Isaiah, and it's a full complete scroll. But then other ones are so fragmentary that we think they're written in Hebrew, but we can't actually tell.
Oh wow.
Because no one's willing to like piece these. And this is true for a lot of stuff. So the largest grouping of papyri literature in the world is the Oxyrhynchus collection, which we get a good portion of our oldest manuscripts of the New Testament from. But if you go to Oxford and you look at the Oxyrhynchus collection, and you pull out that drawer, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You're like,
right.
Like most of it is untranslated, untranscribed.
Yeah.
Because the amount of man hours that it would just take to even put it together, never mind, then go to the effort of transcribing and translating it. And most people are not willing to do that.
And if you're missing chunks, how do you even make that puzzle connect?
Well, that's part of my area of speciality and research.
By the way, I heard that the scrolls that are found in Herculaneum are more than the Oxyrhynchus. There's more there. It's gonna change everything we know about the classics, or even maybe just like mostly the classics. But who knows? Who knows what else is in there? It's gonna change everything. We're gonna have all this new data now. We've already like the few that we've already looked at are already new texts that we've never seen before. One of them had Plato's grave on it. Where to find Plato's grave? Like what? We didn't know that before. This is all coming out today as we speak.
That's awesome.
But Oxyrhynchus was like that at the time. Oxyrhynchus was the biggest discovery ever. Other than Dead Sea. Well, Dead Sea is not that big compared to Oxyrhynchus, but it was impactful. And then Nag Hammadi was like, whoa, look at all these new Christian texts. But those are like the big three, I would say.
Is in regards to that. So I study paratextual features. We're really going to get nerdy today.
Let's get nerdy.
So you look at the features of the manuscripts, not necessarily the words, but things like the spaces between the words, the development of punctuation, indentation or outdentation. And I look at the margins, and I try to, based on the average size of manuscripts in and around that time, and also the average spacing of words and the margins on top, bottom, and the side, recreate what the manuscript could have possibly looked like.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So when you say the book of Isaiah is intact, how
that's
similar
relevant
is it
to
the
your
book of Isaiah that's in the
critique.
Bible?
So that one is.
What's that?
The critique you brought up, that's relevant to him saying at the end of Mark,
Yeah.
you know, there's this space, and he goofed up on that big time. I mean,
yeah, I think they recorded this before maybe that'd be interesting if you said that after my critique of him, but I don't know. I can't tell.
yeah.
Is fascinating. So this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but when we discovered the
but no, that's a good point you just made. If he's studying this stuff, how did he make that? This is his field, and he made that big of a mistake before on the Mark manuscript. This is not a brilliant guy. This is okay. Maybe he's smart. Okay, I'm not saying he's not smart. I'm not saying he's stupid or anything, but this is somebody who's agenda driven, who knows better but says things anyway because he's got that agenda. This is not somebody who's good faith. That to me is case closed. I don't need any more. I don't need to see anything else from Wes to decide that he is not good faith. Period. This guy is not good faith. This is his field, and he went out and told people that the end of Mark has a gap that we don't find in the other Gospels. What? This is your field, and you're saying that that there's no way that you just made a mistake there, unless you don't know your own field, and that's even worse of a problem. But anyways,
Yeah, I think they were trying to get back to, again, that Vaticanus ending.
yes,
But that still doesn't work for Sinaiticus.
No, it doesn't work.
It's like, what kind of special pleading is this to make the long ending somehow still? I don't get it. Yeah.
right.
Great Isaiah Scroll. Previous to that, the earliest copy of Isaiah that we had was in the Masoretic text, which is in the Middle Ages.
There you go.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was literally 1,000 years. We literally pushed back our understanding of Isaiah 1,000 years. And the thing that really shocked scholars, like I said, this isn't true for all the Dead Sea Scrolls, but one of the things that shocked them about Isaiah was that it was word for word identical to the Masoretic text.
Word for word.
Word for word.
Wow.
Yeah,
Word
so this is the
for
Great Isaiah.
Okay.
word.
Now I gotta stop here and criticize Apologia in his video. And this is I'm like halfway joking when I say this. I'm like, because he says in the beginning of his video, Wes was so good for the first 2 hours of this video. It's not until that he brings up a random part. He brings up this random part about the New Testament, about the 400 thing, which is a big mistake that I can't wait to get to. But like, this is in the first hour, let alone first 2 hours. And like, did you not see this part? And like maybe he missed this part, or maybe he didn't realize how big of a blunder this is. For anyone watching who didn't understand what just was said there, Wes has just made the claim that the Isaiah scroll in the Dead Sea Scrolls is word for word, the same as the Bible that they had at the time when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. Word for word. That means
it's 1,000 years. Yeah.
This Bible right here. This Catholic Dove of Peace Bible. Well, actually, no, it has to be Hebrew. So whatever. I don't have my Hebrew's over there. Let's say this is a Hebrew Bible. This Hebrew Bible, Masoretic text, I have it right here. Isaiah, the one that's in here, is exactly word for word the same thing that they dug up in the 19 whatever, when was it, 1900s?
1940.
Yeah. And they found from the 1st century BC or early 2nd century BC, whatever the hell it is. I think it's 1st century BC. Word for word, the same exact Hebrew. That is a mind-blowing if that was true.
Look, we wouldn't even, like, I don't know, man. I don't feel like you and me would be so critical if he didn't literally do the exact thing to Billy. Neil, he literally said to Billy, you're saying that the Genesis account is dependent on Enuma Elish. And he says, yeah, I think it's word for word. Or he says something to the effect of it's borrowing, like literally, you can almost see the identical wording, right? Well, what is the identical wording? And he's like, water splitting from waters. Well, yeah, that is a concept and theme. And yes, that is narrated in the Enuma Elish, but word for word. And this is what Wes tried to like hit Billy on. But truth be told, Billy was actually, not 100% accurate with this. At the end of the day, though, look at what Wes is doing as an expert. So Billy's not a PhD. Billy is not an expert in the field. You're out here talking as an expert in the field, talking outside of an area that is your specialty. And here you are. Or I guess this is your specialty, and you say word for word. This is what a lot of hype recently has been on.
I gotta play that one more time, but I'm gonna play through it, even though we just talked about it. But I want people to listen to what he just said there. Like, this is crazy right here. I'm gonna play it at regular speed. I'm gonna go back to normal for a second.
Okay.
Which is in the Middle Ages.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it was literally 1,000 years. We literally pushed back our understanding of Isaiah 1,000 years. And the thing that really shocked scholars, like I said, this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but one of the things that shocked them about Isaiah was that it was word for word identical to the Masoretic text.
Word for word.
Word for word.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is the Great Isaiah Scroll. So
Wow.
if you go to Israel and
Where's
you
Kip Davis when you want Kip? Summon
yes.
Kip.
No, I think that one is vellum.
What is vellum?
So I should be more specific. So parchment is animal skin. Vellum.
By the way, Dan McClellan did a video about this, and I saw that Ruslan responded with such damage control rhetoric that it blew me away. That oh my God, like, I'm trying to be nice to these people. I don't want to lose, because I already lost IP. He won't talk to me. Most of these Christians do not want to talk to me because I'm a little rude at sometimes, because this is bullshit. Just to say, lack of a better term.
I agree.
But Ruslan was basically going, oh, so what if Wes said it was word for word? We know what he meant. He meant that it was the same meaning in the whole entire thing. Well, that's not the same, dude. And not only that, there are parts that do have a little bit different meaning. I'm not gonna I don't really have that information, so
I
I'm
was
not
gonna let Kip. Kip's probably gonna be doing a thorough.
Kip says, I'll still talk to you, Deal.
I love
that.
Kip.
Is true. Kip and I get nasty with each other. We still talk. So that is,
you guys, people have no.
They don't even know how nasty.
How hard you guys go in the private chat. Look, I'm gonna tell you, they go hard. I have to pretend I'm not watching, but I'm in the corner going, Jerry, and
Yeah. Well, anyways, I'm basically saying so. Ruslan's coverage of the Dan video, I have to say this because it was so damage control. It was so much like, well, so what if you got that wrong? We're still intact here, guys, right? We're still good. He didn't kill us. Like, that's the whole vibe of the video. And by the way, Ruslan tricked me in that video. I watched the video, and Ruslan started off the video as if this was about meaning, as if he was like, Dan McClellan thinks that the meaning has changed. Let's watch his video. And I go, huh? I didn't know Dan said this. Let's watch the video with him. I'm watching along with Russ, and Ruslan's like, and then Dan comes along and says, oh, these are the textual variants. There's 800 something textual variants or something crazy amount of textual variants. And I'm thinking to myself, textual variants, who cares? I go, is he going to bring up any of these meaning differences? And he never does. And Ruslan keeps going, do you guys think that Dan ever brings up any differences? Well, guess what? The answer is 0. And I was like, holy shit. I was like, Russ got him here. And then I went back to the original video that Dan put out. I just wanted to make sure that everything was all good. And then I'm like, Dan is not talking about meaning. He was talking about what Wes says, because Wes says word for. I didn't even know that Wes said word for word until I watched it back.
It made sense. Totally missed word for word. He was doing this.
Yeah, he says word for word, literally, and that's what Wes says. I didn't even know Wes said that. I've somehow missed this. This might be the biggest blunder in the whole video, because that is really crazy of a claim to make. But it was just funny. The damage control was crazy.
I'd be curious we've got Kipster in the chat here, Dr. Kip. If you can get those meaningful differences that actually have theological differences in the 1,000-year gap, that'd be awesome. But this is another shocker to me. I know it's pretty whoa when Joe's in front of Wes being impressed by this and go, whoa, 1,000 years. And they start to elaborate like, man, this is a miracle. And I'm thinking to myself, how quick they dismiss the Quran. And if you really look at the Quran's, like Quranic studies, not from apologetics, from critical scholars who know the Arabic, who study this stuff early on, it's pretty early that they solidify having a Quran, this like what we have as the Quran. And for 1,400 years, practically, it has been practically the same. I mean, for 1,400 years. Do you now feel your gut starting to be summoned by Allah and you now need to join Islam? No, none of that is miraculous to me. There are scribal trained like traditions that this is what you do. You copy and you try to keep it the same. You try to keep it the way it was in your tradition. And of course, there are variations in different schools that we had in the past, but by the time we get to MT, the Masoretic.
We go to Homer. We go to the Homer textual criticism, and there's differences. There's major differences in Homer, but the gist, the story of the Iliad doesn't really change.
Right.
There's not drastic plot-changing things happening within these manuscripts. There's textual variances. Don't get me wrong, but I don't understand why that's such a special thing for the Bible. Oh, the meaning doesn't change. Why would the meaning change? Like why would you expect there to be a meaning change for anything else? I don't know. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Elam can be used synonymously with the term parchment. Technically, parchment is like baby animal skin, like calves or lambs. But this is the Great Isaiah Scroll, and you can see like they stitch together the parchment because it's so long.
God, it's so beautiful. The way they wrote back then was so beautiful. I mean, maybe it's because I can't read it. That's so fat. Maybe if I saw English, I would think that's beautiful too.
Yeah,
especially script.
No, Hebrew on scroll does look
but
beautiful though. You got to, and Greek does too. So does Coptic. Coptic looks great. Syriac looks amazing. I think ancient languages on papyri just has a beautiful look to it. Joe's not wrong.
That is so fascinating because obviously coming from a point of ignorance, the letters look so similar. Like so many of this is what I always got about cuneiform. When I look at that, I'm like, oh,
I used to think that about Hebrew when I first started learning it. I was very what's the word, like scared that because I couldn't tell the difference between like a he and sometimes the mems look like he's and sometimes the yod looks like a vav, and I'm like, how am I gonna know the difference? But once you learn the alphabet, you can't. It's not that hard. Your brain is very good at checking symbols, even if there's a like slight little difference. So your brain will, once you learn the alphabet, you'll see it. But Joe's not wrong. It is very intimidating to look at Hebrew and go, they all look the same. That's kind of a normal reaction to somebody looking at Hebrew for the first time.
particular sort of character
Yeah.
that's this way and that way and up and down and
Oh, cuneiform is wild.
weird.
It's really, really tricky. And that's the thing.
Oh,
when,
yeah, way
like,
harder.
if you're studying ancient languages and you start to study Greek, like the Greek alphabet is similar enough that you're like, okay, alpha looks like an A, right? Delta looks like a D. So you can figure it out. And so it tricks you because you start off and you're like, oh, this is phobios, fear. I know what a phobia is. And you get this false sense of
Phobios, it's the little misspeak there. Remember, Stephen pointed this out. It's phobos, not phobios. But he's like mixing the English phobia with the Greek phobos, which whatever. I probably would have made some error like this too if I was on Joe.
Of course.
So I'm not
all would.
But let's hear what he says.
like encouragement. And then, the further you go down the rabbit hole, you're like, oh, I'm screwed. So, but Hebrew is completely the opposite because the writing system is so different. The learning curve is hard at the beginning. And then you're like, everything is just 3 letters with a suffix added to it. And so it feels like, whereas the opposite is true with Greek. Greek, you're like, I get this. And then when you really go down the rabbit hole, you're like,
I weirdly agree with what he just said there. Hebrew seems very hard at first. And then, like, I haven't mastered Hebrew even close. I'm not even past. I couldn't even call myself barely a beginner in Hebrew. I could just read words, and I don't know I don't know the grammar yet. I'm not even adept at it at all.
Right.
But I will say this: as far as like how much you have to learn for Greek compared to Hebrew, it does seem like Greek has a lot more to get through to master it than it is for Hebrew. So I think he's right about that. And the reason why I agree with him is because Hebrew, you do feel like Hebrew's going to be harder because it's an alphabet that you've never seen before or never used before. All these new symbols that you've never touched before.
Right.
And Greek looks sort of, like you just said, alpha looks similar.
Delta, yeah.
Some of these letters look the same, but like it's like then you start to learn all these clauses and all these different rules for verb for morphology. You're like, oh, this is hard. Whereas Hebrew is once you learn the alphabet with Hebrew, and then there's not a lot of clauses. I could be wrong here, but it's not as much as what I'm saying. There's a lot. Don't get me wrong. It's not simple.
Kip mentioned
it's not like super simple, but like it's not as much.
Yeah, Kip mentioned the book of Job. I have heard about the book of Job. I think it might have been James Tabor or one of these other scholars who had to learn Hebrew too, and they were telling me Job is very difficult.
Yeah, that's why people think it's the oldest because it's so different. I've heard people say that's the old. That I've heard recently that it might not be the oldest. I don't know anymore, but yeah, I've heard that too about Job. Yeah.
Oh crap! None of the things that I learned about that are supposed to be standard, all of them have exceptions.
Wow.
But yeah, cuneiform's a wild one.
Do you know who Rick Strassman is?
No.
He's a scholar and he did a lot of early work, FDA approved work on psychedelics, and he spent 16 years teaching himself to read ancient Hebrew.
Nice.
Yeah, so because he wanted to really understand the Bible from the original source of ancient.
Kip says no one thinks that Job is the oldest. I've heard that before. I've heard that.
Yeah, I think that's a Christian. Like we used to think that. I think Christians used to tell this amongst fundamental.
Really? Why would Christians say that though? That sounds more like a scholarly thing to say.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because Christians want Genesis to be the oldest.
That's a good question. I don't know.
No, I will say
though. What you're saying? Though.
I will say to Kip though. Recently I've been told that that's not a thing anymore. Like, but I definitely would say there's probably someone out there that thinks that. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah. Hebrew, and to understand it in context, because ancient Hebrew, the way the words are structured, is so different than English, and that something must be lost in translation. So he spent 16 years teaching himself how to read ancient Hebrew. Yeah. That is such dedication. 16 years.
It's a long time. That seems too long.
Well, you're self-taught. I mean, he's doing it himself.
Yeah, self-teaching. Yeah, I self-taught myself Greek at first, and then when I started learning it formally, I realized how much you miss when you self-teach yourself.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, how many people can teach you ancient Hebrew? How many courses are available?
Oh, you can take it at any graduate college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is it it's not something that we know what it sounded like, correct?
Yeah, I mean, this is the big debate with ancient languages.
Right.
Like, same thing with, arguably, we don't know how any of this was pronounced.
Right.
I mean, modern Greek speakers get really mad at me when I say that because they're like, of course we know how it's pronounced. It's pronounced like we pronounce it, right? And on all my videos where I'm like site translating Greek manuscripts, there's so many comments of modern Greek speakers getting mad at how I'm pronouncing things. But realistically, we don't really know how most of the things are pronounced with anything.
But isn't that very bizarre when you're translating? Like if you go back to, like, say, the Epic of Gilgamesh. We don't even know what the words sounded like. We kind of know what they represent, and then we do a literal translation of what they represent. But if you've never heard, no one can speak ancient Sumerian.
Yeah. Well, Sumerian's a wild one because it's a language isolate. So Hebrew is an Afro-Semitic language. So Hebrew is related to.
It's Afro-Asiatic, not Afro-Semitic. Semitic is a branch of Afro-Asiatic. I don't know. Maybe I'm being pedantic, but like if you're going to get into the linguistics, at least get the categories right.
to all of these other languages like Aramaic and Akkadian, but language isolates have no adjacent comparisons.
Whoa.
So, because I tried to teach myself Sumerian and I failed and I just gave up because I couldn't do it because I had nothing to really compare it to.
Right.
So Sumeriologists are very like, they're a field of their own because I learned a little bit of Akkadian because I had studied Semitic languages, and there's enough crossover between things like Hebrew and Aramaic and Akkadian, but Sumerian, you have nothing to compare it to. And
What did it eventually become?
It just died.
It just died.
It just died.
How? Do we know?
I mean, the Sumerians lost to the Assyrians, and the Assyrians.
I thought, okay, I'm jumping over a cliff right now. I don't know this for sure. I could be embarrassing myself. I thought Sumerian is pre-Semitic. I thought Sargon of Akkad is the first Semitic dynasty to rule the Mesopotamia, and that Sumerian is a linguistic category that is not Semitic or Indo-European. It's in its own category as like a link. I hope Kip knows this if he's watching. But my guess is I think Wes is wrong here. This is my guess. Wes just said it's an Afro-Asiatic. He called it Afro-Semitic. But Sumerian is pre-Semitic, I thought. Sumerian is before Sargon of Akkad, right? When is Sargon?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Sargon of Akkad. Here, I'll keep playing this while I'm looking this up.
It's got taken over by the Babylonians. I mean, it's just the course of history where things happen. But there are a number of ancient languages that are language isolates, like Linear Elamite. We had no idea.
Sargon of Akkad, his reign is from 2334 to 2279. The first ruler of the Akkadian Empire. The Akkadian Empire is the first Semitic empire of Mesopotamia. That I do know. So I'm pretty sure that Sumerian is pre-Semitic. So, anyways,
dude, the video got flagged.
Our video got flagged?
Dude, the video's not streaming now.
Are you sure?
Says stream is unavailable.
Probably from playing Joe Rogan.
Bro, suspended for policy violations.
Really?
I just refreshed it. Dude, check your fucking account.
Policy violations.
Yeah, that's insane, man.
So I just lost the stream?
You just lost the stream, bro.
What does policy violations mean?
I don't know. We're on the screen. I don't understand. It's not like you have him full screen.
It's blocked for copyright. So you can't even watch Joe Rogan?
Dude, that's fucking horseshit.
You can't even watch Joe Rogan and respond to it?
Not that way, I guess.
That's fucked. So Joe Rogan has a special... We might as well end the stream then.
Yeah, do you want to jump back on a stream without it?